Greetings, everyone. Some of the people on Facebook Live have had the rare treat of listening to our gossip before the meeting actually began. So welcome. This is the Journal-isms Roundtable. I'm Richard Prince, and I write a column called Journal-isms. It's the name Journal-isms Roundtable, which is on diversity issues in the news business, journal-isms.com. We have quite a lineup today. We're trying to stick to the schedule. We had more than 80 people RSVP. We don't know if they'll all be able to make it, but that's one reason why we have to move things along. So I am going to move things. Oh, by the way, we started this roundtable in 1999. We've been doing it practically every month since then. And we moved to Zoom once the pandemic kicked in, and which has enabled us to have people who are unable to be here in person in Washington, D.C. So let's just try to stick to the schedule. We're going to open up with an old friend, John Funabiki, and his colleague, Valerie Bush. John just retired on January 1st, and Valerie stepped in. So I want them to give us a little, for those of us who are not out there on the East Coast in the Bay Area, on the West Coast in the Bay Area, to tell us a little about what the project is and what else they'd like us to know for a few minutes. So take it away, John and Valerie, please.
So I'm here. I think Valerie is here.
I'm here. I'm
All
here.
right.
good.
Hi, Valerie.
All right.
Good to see you.
Hi, everyone.
So Richard, shall I start since I'm departing and Valerie's taking over? So
Take it away. Go ahead.
yeah. So hello, everyone. My name is John Funabiki. It's really great to be here. I actually know a number of folks who are on the RSVP list, so I hope we get to be able to shout out to each other at some point. I just retired as the founder and executive director of Renaissance Journalism. You'll find us on the web at renjournalism.org. We are a nonprofit social justice journalism project. We started in 2009, and Valerie joined me at that time. And what we do is organize special initiatives on social justice and equity issues. And we work with journalists around the country on a whole variety of issues, housing segregation, inequities in public education, the legacy of Agent Orange in Vietnam. So we've worked with hundreds of journalists, photographers, filmmakers on these things. We've had extensive work in the San Francisco Bay Area on the housing crisis, and Valerie will tell you about some of the new plans that she's got cooking. And it's just been absolutely terrific. Our process has been to identify an issue that needs public attention, to figure out what's wrong with the news coverage and how can it be improved. Our main goal is to get journalists to really push journalists to reframe the way they cover stories and think about the equity and social justice implications. And that's kind of our theme. That's the backbone of our work. We give out reporting grants. We organize collaborative reporting projects. So for example, we had 25 education reporters looking at education, public schools and equity. We do trainings and convenings and briefings. And so it's been really terrific. And after 2009, you do the math, I decided it was time for me to retire. I'm getting old. I'm an OG. Richard knows that. Having worked as a foreign correspondent, I ran a nonprofit at San Francisco State University on media and diversity. I was a program officer at the Ford Foundation, and I'm also been a professor at San Francisco State University. So it's time for me to hang it up. I've got lots of other things I want to do, and then asked Valerie if she would take it over, because she's got a great background, and I'll let her introduce herself as well. But many of you know her from her previous work at Asian American Journalists and Unity Journals of Color. So let me turn it over to Valerie.
Welcome, Valerie.
Hi, everyone. I also see a lot of familiar names and faces. I actually bring back sort of memories. I worked at the Maynard Institute for Journalism Education for 4 or 5 years in the mid-90s. So I think I met a lot of you then. I met a lot of you when I was, I think I met Bobby Bowen when I was an intern at the Washington Post, you know, a really scared older journal person. I was in my 30s. I was probably the oldest intern they probably had ever had there, because my background, I had just come from being a community organizer and activist in the domestic violence movement. That was my entree into journalism. So I just remember her reaching out to me and really providing
Valerie, let me
support.
interrupt. What are you guys doing that no one else is doing?
What are we doing that no one else is doing? We are, I think what's really unique about Renaissance journalism is our focus on social justice and equity, and using journalism, harnessing the power of journalism to educate, to empower, to change public policy, to use that, harness that power of journalism and great storytelling to do that, to promote and advance social justice and equity. So I don't know of any other organizations right now that are really focused singularly on that. I think what also makes us really unique is our approach with journalism. John was mentioning we've launched myriad initiatives to support journalists and news organizations, but our approach and what we're trying to impart or encourage journalists to do is quite unique in that one, we encourage, and we do this by providing support and training to get journalists to have a more systems analysis in their work, to look critically at the systems that perpetuate these inequities. So structural racism, for example, and we refer to it as to utilize the lens of equity and social justice when investigating a story. We do a lot of work with journalists in all our programs to help them take a more systems approach to and a more critical systems approach to look at the systemic drivers that are like the root causes of so many of these inequities. The other thing we do, which John mentioned, which is really, again, guide and encourage journalists to shift the narrative, as we like to put it. We don't actually use that language with journalists because although I think times are changing, journalists are talking about dominant narratives now and how we can change the narrative. But we have always used the language of reframing the narrative so that it has more, again, an equity focus.
Let me just interrupt for a minute here. That's something that a lot of commentators and observers have mentioned since the George Floyd killing and the what has been wrong with journalism up to that point. So I'm glad you're doing that. Now, I did promise the folks that I would ask you about your upbringings.
Right.
Yeah, with Valerie being a Chinese American growing up in a Mexican American community, and John being Japanese American growing up in the Black community. What was that like? What's the takeaway from that experience?
So I'm really happy that you asked me about that question, Richard. So I grew up in a town called East Palo Alto, California. Many of you know Palo Alto because of its association with Stanford. Fewer know about East Palo Alto, which is on the wrong side of US 101. Predominantly Black community. I grew up there because, frankly, when my parents got out of the concentration camps and out of the army after World War II, it was one of the few places that they could buy a house where they were able to, actually secure a new home after the concentration camps. And by the time it was also the subject or the target of racial blockbusting by real estate agents. By the time I graduated from high school, my high school was approximately 70 to 80% African American, then Latino, primarily Mexican American, and then a smattering of Japanese, Chinese, and Filipinos. It was the best experience I could ever imagine because growing up in a multicultural environment, we didn't even realize it, what we were experiencing at the time. My class, the class of 67, has had many reunions since then. And the groups that come back all say, whether they're white, black, Asian, Latino, all say that they would never have traded that experience and that it has shaped their lives, shaped their thinking. And it certainly shaped my thinking about equity and racial injustice. And it therefore shaped the way I think about journalism. And so that's really kind of the root of why I do what I do. And I'm sure Valerie's had the same experience.
Is that true, Valerie?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things as John and I got to know each other, and we've known each other for a long time, even before Renaissance journalism. I think we realized, whoa, this is we had a similar upbringing, and even I would also add a very working class upbringing, so that also affects one's values. I would add I'm Chinese American, but I'm actually multiracial Chinese American. So that adds to, for me, my experience. That's why my last name is Bush. That's my father's name. And my father was Eurasian. He was born in Shanghai, but raised in Hong Kong in a Eurasian multiracial family. So had that whole experience of always being on the outside, as he liked to put it, in China, I was discriminated against by Chinese because they thought I was white. And then he came here to the United States and felt the brunt of racism for being a person of color. And that really did affect how he was. It affected his health, it affected his mental health. So that really had a profound impact on me, being multiracial. But they moved to this small town. It occurred to me, John, listening to you, they've always said they moved there just because they could afford it, but maybe it was due to redlining. I've never really thought of that angle. But they moved to a town called La Puente, which is in the San Gabriel Valley of Southern California. And it's predominantly Latino. It's predominantly Mexican American and white. And I often joked we were the only Asian American family in that town. And I've since met young people who are growing up there, and they're always shocked to hear that I'm from there. They're just looking at me in my face and going, wait, what? And then I joke, well, it was predominantly Mexican American. Then they're like, it's still predominantly Mexican American. And there are no Asians actually living there. I'm like John, I don't ever look at that experience as bad. It's everything about it to me is very good. We moved when I was 12, and we moved to Northern California. So then I was exposed to the Asian American community in San Francisco, which was kind of a culture shock for me, actually. So that's a whole nother story. And I went to UC Berkeley, very Asian, again, culture shock. But I've always the other thing about La Puente was we were Catholic, and we belonged to the church. We were very active in the church. I went to Catholic school. And again, the school was predominantly Mexican American. So it was kind of this combination of culture and religion that was I think just very enriching. I think, I've just noticed everywhere I've lived in the Bay Area, I've lived in New York, have dealt with this whole issue of diversity and multiculturalism. I'm always just struck by, I think that's where I'm so happy that I had this experience, because I just feel, I always think, why, it's sort of this, I don't understand why we don't see the richness of learning from each other, and our communities and our cultures, and how much more powerful we are when we work together. So, so that, like, when AAJ started to work on unity, it really was to me such a natural thing to think, why don't the different minority journalism associations, for example, work together? And in fact, celebrate the differences, which I thought were always like really fun to see, actually. Um, so I think it shaped my values. It definitely shaped my passion for journalism, for storytelling, to sort of to capture the stories of people I often felt whose stories were not being told. I think it made me a better community organizer. When I was a community organizer, I didn't feel like I had a lot of like I was a community organizer in an all-white Appalachian poor community in Indiana, as a Vista volunteer. And again, I was the only Asian in that whole town. I mean, I literally was the only Asian and probably person of color in that whole town. But yeah, I just felt like I could still do that work, and I could go door to door and knock on people's doors. I think partly because of my background, my experience of just being, knowing that, really, if you just start talking, maybe have a dialogue with someone, you can actually break through some of that the barriers. But
Okay, great. That's great. All right,
yeah.
well, let's give them applause. So we'll have a chance to ask some questions later, after we hear all the speakers. Next, we're going to have George Derek Musgrove, who some of you have seen at our holiday party back in 2017 when he had the book Chocolate City: History of Race in the District of Columbia. And now he's got a new project. I'd like you to share the screen so that we can all see what he has brought with him. But I'm not sure I know how to do that. So let me just try it here and see how I do that. George, Derek, can you see us?
Yes, I can. And good morning or good afternoon, everyone.
Okay, good. Let's go. Now let me see how I can share the screen.
Richard, I've already done it. You don't have to worry about it. It's done.
All right, Derek, you're on.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to take a few minutes here, and let me make sure that I've got that in presenter mode so you all can see it. Can everyone see that well?
Stokely.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to take a few minutes, and Richard said 15, so I'll aim for 10, and talk about the Black Power in DC website. So this website I decided to put together after we were finishing up Chocolate City, as a way to just talk to the larger public who didn't want to pick up a 600-page book, to introduce, I think, one of the most important social movements in the city's history to a lay population. So just to give you the background on this first picture, these are sort of the two of the most influential Black Power activists in the city's history, as many of you all already know. I know that because I've used many of your articles to put this thing together. And that's Marion Barry on the left, Stokely Carmichael back in the city from Guinea on the right. And he's, of course, here for African Liberation Day. This was in 1979. Now, I'm having trouble advancing the screen here, pardon me. There we go. Okay, so the website itself is set up like this. Once you land on the title page, you have a narrative section that basically gives you an overview of Black Power organizing in the city from so the origins of the Black Power movement, the precursors to it in the early 1960s. And then it takes us all the way through the end of the activism of the Black Power generation in 1998. And I'll show you the end picture for that in a second. One of the things I really wanted to do with the website, though, and we got this idea from people like Maria McWhorter, who put together an amazing website on the city, is they have an interactive map that allowed you to see where all of the major events and organizations of the Black Power politics in the city occurred. And so when you go into the website, after you move away from the main narrative, you can go into these 4 interactive maps and basically look at where Black Power activism occurred across the cityscape. It's not perfect. As many of you all know, some of these organizations had 2 and 3 offices. And so I had to choose the one that I thought that they were in the longest or was the most important. But generally, you can follow this stuff. And I try to point out in the little descriptions that you see on the side of the map if these people moved around a great deal, so that you know that the pin is only representing one thing or one place where they were. The full website address, by the way, is in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, blackpowerindc.umbc.edu. So I'll start off with just a quick tour through the narrative of the website and just give you some of the pictures that I use in the website. I know Peter Bailey's on the line, so he'll recognize this gentleman in the middle of the picture. Malcolm X was, of course, one of the ideological standard bearers of Black Power politics, really seeded the movement among a younger generation of activists. And he was in and out of DC quite a lot. This is him speaking at Uline Arena in 1961 to a crowd of about 10,000. He was also, for a very brief period of time, the minister of Mosque Number 4, the interim minister of Mosque Number 4 in 1960.
Wait, Derek?
Yes.
People are saying that the slides are not advancing.
Oh, they're not?
No, we still have Stokely and Marion.
Oh, God. Okay. Let me stop sharing and see if I can. Okay. My screens are. Looks like one of my screens froze up. And so let me try that one more time. My apologies, all.
No worries.
Okay. Can everyone see that now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my apologies. I'll just, this is the layout of the website that I thought you all saw when I was talking about it, but you did not. And so there's the main narrative and then the map pages. And there, of course, is the website address. Free and open to the public and will always be. And so please do check it out at your leisure. And because this is for a lay audience, I really try to advance many of my arguments through the narrative. So the first thing is I just talk about the ideological roots of Black Power in the city. And one of the people that's central to that is Malcolm X. He was in the city a lot, as I mentioned, and this is him at Uline Arena. Of course, Mosque Number 4 was one of the earliest in the country, one of the most active. And it really gets active actually in the 80s and 90s. And so we sort of circle back to the Nation of Islam as we move through the narrative of the map. Next thing I talk about is the Black Power movement, which I date from 1966 to 1976. Those are approximate dates because, of course, it's hard to find starting and end dates for movements, but nonetheless, this works for our purposes. And here I talk about some of the major institutions that drive Black Power organizing in the city. Of course, the New School of Afro-American Thought, which was on 14th Street, right below Florida Avenue. This here is a picture of Stokely Carmichael, who was regularly at the New School, used it as sort of a URSAT's office for a time. And he's actually organizing here around the shooting death of Elijah Bennett, which you all may remember from reporting on 1968. Bennett was jaywalking on U Street. And when an officer attempted to stop him, he punched the officer then pulled out his revolver and shot him. Students from the New School of African American Thought immediately went out into one of the busiest intersections in the city at the time, sat down and shut it down. And so this is on that same day, roughly at that moment. The other thing one of the other things I try to focus on in this very big section, the Black Power movement section has about 120 different discrete entries in the map, is I talk about African Liberation Day, which of course is one of the seed beds for DC becoming one of the national centers in the effort to stop American support for colonialism or white settler governments in Southern Africa. And so African Liberation Day, which was first held in 1972 and held every single year until 1990 in Malcolm X Park, really helps to seed the larger activist community that also runs the Free South Africa movement in the 1980s.
Derek, who gets the photo credits on these?
So I had to pull most of my photos from the Star collection because the Washington Post morgue is closed to researchers. And so those of you who are attached to folks at the Post, please do lobby them for me. I talked to the Metro editor, Monica Norton. She was really receptive, but she wasn't getting much response from on high. But so I pulled most of my photos from the Star collection at the MLK Library. The Informer, Denise Rollock Barnes, was kind enough to let me in there during the pandemic, and I sat in a room by myself, all masked up, digging through boxes.
Mm.
And then also, I was able to visit Spingarn before the pandemic, and so got a number of great photos from them as well.
I'll point out that the Post now has a high-ranking managing editor specifically for diversity. So I don't know if she has the word or not.
I'd love to talk more to the folks at the Post because they really do have one of the richest collections on Black Power organizing in the city, and it's basically under lock and key. And that I think is a shame for the people of the city who should know more about this movement.
Okay, thank you.
In the late 1970s, one of the remarkable things about DC is so many Black Power activists make the move into government. We're, of course, the first city in the country to have a former Black Power activist elected mayor, at least the first major city in the country with Marion Barry. And before that, in the 4 years before that, we had huge numbers of Black Power activists elected onto the council. In fact, if you look at the council in 1975, 11 of the 13 members are either civil rights, anti-poverty, or Black Power activists. It's a remarkable supermajority, including among the white members like David Clark, who had worked for SCLC. But unfortunately, those folks couldn't just sort of be absorbed into government and be done. As soon as they got into government, the Reagan Revolution occurs, the Carter and then the Reagan recession occur, and many of the gains that they had struggled for in the 60s and 70s begin to slip away. And so many of them get back out into the streets, and DC is a critical forum for some of that activism, whether it was the marches on Washington of 1983, 1988, and 1993. This is Jesse Jackson pictured here with Gary Mayer, Richard Hatcher, two nationally prominent Black Power activists. Or it was the Million Man March. And in fact, before the Million Man March, the Nation of Islam decided to make DC the first place in the country where it decided to enter electoral politics, actually running candidates here and in Prince George's County. And so DC was a critical place for when folks tried to come back out, of these institutional places where they had come to reside and get back into the streets and try to restart the movement. I'll end with this. Although many of these activists were very active in the mid-1980s, they were also getting up in their years. They were becoming septuagenarians. And some of those folks, unfortunately, like Kwame Ture, passed before their time. He, of course, died of cancer not too long after this picture was taken in 1998. And he had this huge tribute dinner. In fact, many of his colleagues had it for him here in DC. And it gives you an idea of how successful this movement, of which he was such a critical part, was. Many of the prominent aging Black Power activists across the country came to this tribute dinner in 1998. And of course, the mayor came and was one of his old comrades. One of his old comrades from SNCC was a member of Congress, John Lewis. And so I end the map here, but I also end it here because after Barry retires, which he announces a month after this dinner, the city's politics change. Anthony Williams gets into office and expressly says, I'm going to adopt a new Black politics that's far less focused on this stuff that Barry and his ilk were focused on, and we're going to focus on competent management. And it's at that point that I argue that Black Power style politics were no longer dominant in DC, and I bring the era to a close. So all in all, there are about 183 entries on Black Power events and organizations in the map. And the hope is that folks will get in there, check them out, learn about one of the most important movements in late 20th century DC history, and especially for those young activists who are out in the street today, actually learn about some wonderful models that may be things to learn from as they engage some of these issues again a generation after this politics had gone from the scene.
Very good. Well, thank you, Derek. And any more questions you can put into the chat, or we'll get back at the end of the session. So we are sticking pretty much the schedule. So thank you for the speakers so far. And now we want to get to our pastors. I watched Reverend Lamar, Pastor Lamar, this morning, and he had Jeremiah Wright, and he wove it into his sermon about they can burn the flags, but they can't burn, what's inside of us and our perspective. So I will now ask Pastors Mills and Pastor Lamar, and well, I'll let them. Brad Bennett wanted to introduce a speaker from Southern Poverty Law Center, so let me do that. I don't know whether Pastor Mills or Pastor Lamar wants to go first.
I'll defer to Dr. Mills if she would.
Okay, Dr. Mills, you're on, and then we'll hear from Brad Bennett to introduce, make another introduction. Pastor Mills.
I'm here.
All right.
Okay, thank you. So my understanding is you just want us to share our story and thoughts, and I'm pretty sure that most of you are aware that on December 12th, the Black Lives Matter banners at both congregations were destroyed by the Proud Boys. At Metropolitan, theirs was torn down, broken up, and for Asbury, our banner was torn down, paraded down 11th Street, and then burned in the street, and burned using an accelerant. The person had a bottle of lighter fluid. Of course, videos of these incidents were posted on social media, and it was clear that it was the Proud Boys. I wrote a press release that has been widely circulated, that I found the incident to be reminiscent of cross burnings. As I watched the words Black Lives and the name of our church being burned, I saw Black bodies and saw old images of lynchings and cross burnings. We held a service of prayer and solidarity. We had a lot of outpouring of support from other religious leaders across denominations and houses of worship. And after hanging a new banner, at least for us, we hung a new banner. And within a week of hanging that new banner, the new banner was taken down over the Christmas holiday, over the Christmas weekend. And we have since hung a third banner, which remains today. For me, the implications of this is that it was an obvious attempt at intimidation. It was deliberate and planned. It was allegedly out of an anti Black Lives Matter movement ideology, but most certainly it was out of racism, although the Proud Boys deny that. The attacks on our churches were more destructive and more violent than those of two white churches that also lost banners on that December weekend. The attacks were also videoed as trophies for social media. And, it's clear that we were Black congregations. Proud Boys kind of argued that they didn't know we were a Black congregation. Metropolitan, clearly AME, you can't miss the African in AME. In our case, Asbury is a United Methodist church. We're part of a predominantly white denomination, but we have signage on our corner that identifies us as a Black church and as part of DC's African American Heritage Trail. I also see this as a sign of, a clear sign of a rise in white supremacy and a sign that church burnings may be possible in this climate that we are currently living in. I want to share why we have a sign and why we feel persistent about displaying that sign. We are displaying our Black Lives Matter sign as a statement regarding the value of Black people, Black lives, that Black lives are valued by God and us. We, as a congregation, had long discussions before hanging our sign. We resolved to make that statement after the death of Tamir Rice, who was only 12 years old when he was shot while playing with a toy gun in a park. And he was shot almost immediately by a police officer who arrived in response to a call. That incident is the incident that prompted us to begin to be a witness, to be a social witness. We also are displaying our Black Lives Matter sign to make a statement as Methodists. We're not Marxists and we're not socialists. We're Christian and we're Methodists. And Methodists believe in personal holiness and social holiness. We believe in the Christian goal of the perfect love of God and neighbor. And therefore, we cannot ignore social inequities and disparities, discrimination and oppression. And we see overcoming them as tied to wholeness and salvation. Our response in all of this is that we remain resilient and persistent in proclaiming that Black Lives Matter, and proclaiming it in the face of shootings of unarmed Black men and women, mass incarceration, disparities in healthcare, and all forms of systemic racism. We remain persistent as well in our commitment and moving towards realizing a beloved community. And so the way for us, we see a way forward out of all of this, out of these hate-filled acts. And we see that way forward as continuing to build blocks or build paths towards God's beloved community. I'm seeing the lines blurring between white supremacy and white nationalism and religion, Christianity in particular. But the Christian church, and really all of us, regardless of your religion or non-religion, all of us have a responsibility to unblur those lines and to honestly confront the sin of racism and to work for a more just and equitable society. I think I'll just stop there. I have more than I could say, but I think that's enough.
All right, we'll be back with questions then. Okay, Pastor Lamar.
Thank you, sir. And it's a joy to be with you all. I see a lot of people I've known and people who fellowship at Metropolitan. For me, I want to frame it a little differently. I've tried to articulate my thinking in some pieces. It's a battle of story. This is a battle of the myths, the stories that give us meaning. And we have to be very clear that what happened at these churches, at Metropolitan, at Asbury, to me is an ongoing reality that began with white settler colonialism. It is a reality that says, I own what I survey. You can only exist in a space with my permission, and where you exist, at any time I can violate your person and or your possessions. So you draw a direct line to what Mr. Trump did in front of the Episcopal Church across Lafayette Square, where Black people were peacefully protesting. He used the force of the military of the American Empire to dislocate bodies, to harm them with chemicals, and then to stand in front of a church with the Bible and take a picture. Where Dr. Mills was speaking about the blurred lines, I would say, along with Willie Jennings and with so many others, that American Christianity is the carrier of white supremacy. That there is no American Christianity that is in its white iteration without white supremacist impulse. That essentially the church baptized and gave theological language for white supremacy, for settler colonialism, and for kleptocratic capitalism, which flows from enslavement and the taking of land of Native people. So what happened with the Proud Boys is as made in America as a Buick or a Chevrolet was at the time of my grandfather and his brothers. It's a distinct way of viewing people of African descent as disposable and as subhuman. So let me get at something anecdotal. We were under quite a lot of security, and we have our own security team. And on the 6th, we had our security out front, and of course, there were hordes of MAGA people in town. And one of them was in a wheelchair, an older white woman being pushed down in front of the church by an older white gentleman, all in full MAGA regalia. And she stood in front of our chief of security, and this is what she said: "We're here because we hate niggers." She's very clear. So what's important is they may dress it up in language of liberty, freedom, democracy. And then here's another issue with me. We got, as people who exist with words are the tools that journalists use and the people in my profession use. You have to be very careful with language. This is a fuscatory language: liberty, justice, freedom. It does not mean liberty, justice, freedom. What it means is we still control space and we seek to control your bodies. Even the language of democracy, you cannot call the United States of America democracy. You can say it aspires to be a democracy, but you cannot have a democracy where people are kept from voting. You cannot have a democracy where the same type of voter suppression my grandparents fought, the South is innovating new ways. Right now, the Republicans are in their demonic laboratories cooking up new ways of gerrymandering, cooking up new ways to suppress votes. And it is what Malcolm said: if a cat has kittens in the oven, you don't call the kittens biscuits.
Yes.
Because they call this a democracy doesn't make it a democracy. We have to be clear that this is kleptocracy from the beginning. This is oligarchy, this is plutocracy. I found a new word, kakistocracy, which is government by stupid people, right? So we need to be clear, and journalism has, and theology has to critique the American imperial system, its theology, and its economics, which we don't do. So for me, what they did is an ongoing assault, and what we have to do is to be clear around our language. And the last thing I'll say, because much of what I've said has not been constructive, I move in the world with a constructive spirit. So what is it that we must build? We must build something that has never existed here. And that is, and I think Sister Valerie, Brother John would agree with me from perspectives similar to ours, but somewhat different. There has never existed in America in a sustained, a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial democracy. It has never existed. And we have to be the ones to build it in a sustained way. And so I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. We have a few questions for the two of you in the chat. Let me call on some people. All right, here's one from Nichelle Smith. Nichelle?
Hi there, Reverend Lamar and Reverend Mills. My name is Nichelle Smith. I'm Enterprise Editor for Racism and History at USA Today, and my work is aimed at directly looking at the roots of racism, the systems that have been put in place, and what it takes to dismantle them. And as I heard Reverend Lamar speak and express his philosophy, his position that this is a direct continuation from colonialism, which I very clearly see now, what do you make of the leader of the Proud Boys, assuming that he really is the leader and not just somebody trotted out to be the poster child for what's wrong with this movement. He is Afro-Latino, at least last time I checked the reports. So what do you make of that in him essentially leading this organization that has attacked your church?
Let me say this, Sister Nichelle, thank you for the question. Also, Metropolitan is suing the Proud Boys. And our strategy is very similar to Southern Poverty Law Center. We seek to name it as a conspiracy and to stop their ability to do what they do by attacking their finances, which is the only thing that they do not, as I think it was Ida Wells and Dr. Malvoca helped me, who said, it is foolish to think that you can attack white supremacy with a moral argument. The only thing they understand is finances, is money. So my answer to you, Sister Nichelle, would be this. The best cheerleaders for white supremacy are Black people. So, because if you think about it, for white supremacy, you get a twofer. So you get someone who looks like me, who can ring the bells of white supremacy. So then you can say, oh, it's really not that bad. See, it's really in their interest for us to control the thing, right? So when I see this brother over the Proud Boys, I think again, white supremacy is not just for white people. There are many people who are okay with the vast inequality, the baked in. So let's just talk about housing. I don't want to be abstract. After World War II, the Federal Housing Administration gave white people money to build the suburbs. So white wealth amongst the majority of white folks is built on government support. They refuse the same support to the people that look like me and you and John and Valerie. And then they blame us, by and large. The narrative of the media is around Black irresponsibility, Black ontological criminality, to say nothing about the fact that the New Deal, the way they passed it, is Southern senators saying, oh, as long as agricultural and domestic workers, a la Black people, don't get a piece of it. So the government has aided and abetted white supremacy. And going back to your question, there are many Black people who do not question these systemic injustices, who trumpet how great America is, who trumpet this is the greatest nation in the world, preachers like me falling over themselves to talk about God chose Obama, God chose Bush. God does not choose leaders of empires that oppress and crush people. And we have to be clear about that.
Okay. Melanie Eversley. Melanie?
Yes, thank you. Hello, Pastor. Actually, this is for whoever would like to answer. You know, as Black people, we certainly have been aware that there are divisions in America, but I've heard a lot of people say that they've been shocked at the depth of what we've seen, in particular over the last 6 months, culminating with the attack on the Capitol. Some folks are breathing a sigh of relief with the change in administration and a president that says that he would like to bring people together. But certainly groups like the Proud Boys, MAGA supporters are not going to go away. Just wanted to know if you all had any prediction as to what's going to happen with these groups in the years to come.
I defer to Dr. Mills. I'll talk enough.
I think you've already answered your own question. They are not going away anytime soon. That they are clearly still out there and still intending, you know, to do harm or to gain control. Yeah, that's.
What I would add to that is definitely Biden as president is a country mile better than Trump. But what I will also say is this: the Democratic Party, by and large, is neoliberal. It is also very tied to American kleptocratic capitalism and corporate money. Much of what Mr. Biden has done, I see some healthy signs. But what I share with people is this: the Democratic Party fights for justice up until the point that normally it will crush their ability to hold on to power, or crush their ability to get the money that they need to maintain their party status. So Joe Biden won, Kamala Harris won, the Democrats won. My question is, will the masses win? The masses of working, poor Americans win. And that, the answer to that will only come after we take a sustained view of their policies. Will we get a minimum wage? And $15 we still know is woefully inadequate. Will there be universal health care? Will they make sure that student loans are taken care of? I am interested in using the largesse of the American empire in the interest of poor and working people. Since Ronald Reagan, by and large, you all know that there's been a concerted effort to roll back any hint of the New Deal, any hint of a social safety net. And what we ought to be concerned about, a net keeps somebody from falling in a hole. We need elevators. We don't want nets. We want elevators. So I'm looking for that kind of public policy. And unfortunately, the history of corporate Democrats in America is they don't go all the way. And so it is incumbent upon people like me to make sure that we offer no hospitable space for milquetoast, lukewarm Democrats. So let's see what they do.
All right, Ken Walker, you had a question about the logistics here.
You know,
Richard.
Yes.
A. Peter Bailey.
Yeah, well, let let Ken ask this question first.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Ken, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I mean, it's almost impossible to commit a crime in public these days. I mean, you got cameras that the government places, that businesses place, and then even begin to get into the cell phone phenomenon. Are there no cameras around your churches, either for your own security as a church or nearby government and corporate cameras to identify them? That's how they're identifying these terrorists at the Capitol.
Right.
I mean, is this that? I mean, why haven't these tapes been pulled and they're trying to find these people?
No, I see it. That's where you know.
Dr. Mills, how would you?
Yeah, they did pull tapes. And in our case, sorry, they did pull tapes, and in our case, our cameras did not get all of what occurred, but some of it. But it was all on social media anyway, and so very easy to identify the persons involved, and for us is the person who came forward claiming he did it. I can't tell from the video that it's him, but he says it's him in one piece of the footage. I would suspect that the people who are in the videos that were taken in front of Metropolitan, same thing. We can see faces and so forth. So the FBI was supposed to be investigating. We identified it as a hate crime, and I'm not sure what more we can do.
Well, that may be an issue that journalists, still practicing journalists, may wish to take up in terms of given the ubiquity of all these cameras, why the government, why the FBI is not taking a serious hard look at the people who vandalized your churches. That's going to be an increasing thing. Burning Black churches is nothing new, and it never went away.
Mm-hmm.
And most Black churches by now have some degree of personal security cameras of their own.
Right.
But even without there, in downtown Washington, there must be 5 cameras for every square foot from somebody. Government, businesses, closed circuit. So anyway.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Susan Cork is here to give us the perspective from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Brad, did you want to introduce Susan?
Yeah, be happy to. Thanks, Richard. First of all, I just want to say, it's great to see many of you who I've worked with, over my career, who I greatly respect. And it's just great to see all of you looking so good. I will say I want to, give a particular props to Reverend Lamar, because I grew up in Metropolitan. I was christened there. I'm from DC. That's my church. That's where I accepted the Lord. When I was 15, and this was I'll give my age, but back in '83, when I also participated with my parents in the '83 March on Washington. And I participated years later where in the Million Man March, where my father was also present there, and I was covering it as well for the Asbury Park Press. So shout out to my peeps in New Jersey, Melanie and Wayne. I see you.
The introduction.
Okay, all right, I get to it. I just wanted to throw that out there. So as you know, the SPLC, where I work now, is a catalyst for racial justice in the South. We work in partnership with communities to dismantle white supremacy and strengthen intersectional movements and advance the human rights of all people. Just in the interest of time, I do want to introduce Susan Cork, who is our new Intelligence Project Director. She is an international human rights advocate and former State Department official who's defended and advanced inclusive democracy worldwide for over 2 decades. And she comes from the German Marshall Fund, where she served as a senior fellow and executive director of the bipartisan Transatlantic Democracy Working Group and is co-author of the Democracy Playbook, which is a resource to fight authoritarianism and strengthen democratic resilience. And she leads the Intelligence Project, which recently, as many of you may know or should know, put out the Year in Hate report, which talks about how the number of numerically the number of hate groups may have gone down, but now the white nationalism as a movement has grown, and is more difficult to track because people are linking up online and not necessarily putting their names down as members of a hate group. But the movement itself has grown tremendously since the inauguration of Donald Trump.
All right, Susan,
Donald Trump.
you're on.
Go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Brad. And I'm deeply honored to be able to speak today. Thanks to Richard for making it possible. And I'm really humbled to speak after Pastor Mills and Reverend. And I got one, but democracy itself is not an end state, it's a process. And America really needs to find humility and honesty right now. We need to build a better democracy. Southern Poverty Law Center is now in its 50th year. And it's been, as you all probably know, a catalyst for racial justice in the South and beyond, particularly working in partnership with communities to dismantle white supremacy and advance human rights. I started at Southern Poverty Law Center right after the violent insurrection on January 6th. So what a time to start in this job. As Brad said, I'm the Director of Intelligence, which is kind of a mistitle. I would describe my job as monitoring, exposing, and fighting racism and white supremacy as part of the mission to build a truly inclusive and equitable democracy. You may have seen my 6-year-old daughter come across the screen. And, this has become the family's work. She's been down in we're in DC. We've been down protesting in Black Lives Matter Plaza. We've been in front of the church. She's been making Black Lives Matter signs. And I, having monitored democracy around the world and at home for the past 20 years, I see us really being in a moment of reckoning. I'm asked a lot if things are going to get better now with Biden and Harris. And of course, I'm in this work because I'm an optimist. But as we've all been talking about, there's a long history of systemic racism. And what we do now as a country will determine whether we can change a troubled legacy in America. Vandalizing historic churches that have been so vital to the African-American community in DC, that instills fear in communities, and that's what it's intended to do. And it says something terrible about America. In order for America to be an inclusive, multi-ethnic America, we all need to do our part. I know I only have about another minute, so I just wanted to share a few key findings from our recently released Year in Hate report. And I encourage you to read it because there's a number of essays too, in addition to the data. Not surprisingly, we found that our nation faces an increasingly dangerous threat from homegrown extremists, ranging from anti-government militias to hate groups and white supremacists. I saw in the question somebody asking, is it going to get better now? I see right now that Biden and Harris have inherited an elevated threat landscape. That's what our research showed us. January 6th didn't happen out of nowhere. Radicalization had been happening for years. White supremacists during the Trump era really found that they had, a direct line to the White House. They didn't need to be joining groups formally anymore. They had a hater-in-chief in the White House. That's another finding of this year's report, is that the threat is much more diffuse. It's much harder to track. This has been exacerbated by the pandemic and by technology. The tech companies are a little bit late to the game in deplatforming these white supremacists and other hate groups. It's an important step, but that just means that they will go to Parler and Gab and other more encrypted places. So I guess I'll end there just saying that the threat to America is as high and probably even higher. These groups are networked, they are mobilized. Groups like the Proud Boys have been able to operate with near complete lack of accountability for years. The January 6th protest showed how differently law enforcement, security forces respond to a white supremacist rally than to how they've responded to Black Lives Matter movement. So the real reckoning too will be looking deeply at our law enforcement, security services, Department of Defense, military, and really being committed to rooting out white supremacy from top to bottom. And I'll end on one final recommendation that we make, and that is that this is about education, not enforcement. We know that the laws in this country have been used in a discriminatory way against people of color, Muslims, African Americans. So it's not about more enforcement. There's plenty of laws on the books. It's about working with deep community levels. It's working to dismantle racism from top to bottom within our system. I'll end there. Happy to take some questions. But thank you again so much for having me today. This is an incredible group, and I'm so humbled and grateful to have this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Roger Witherspoon had a question in the chat. Roger, are you there? Okay. Well, we'll get back to Roger. Then Wayne Dawkins, did you have a question? All right, let me go back into some other questions in here then. Okay. Okay, Hamil Harris.
Yeah, hey, Richard. I guess for the Southern Poverty Law Center, you all have been following this. Can you give me basically what was the report on these right-wing groups? A lot of them out of Alabama, where you guys look at, what has been reported up to this point, now that there's obviously a new Justice Department, and are there meetings being planned? What's the game plan? And also for the ministers, what type of meeting? I see what's being done with the poverty campaign, Reverend Lamar and Reverend Mills, but what about a cohesive, a comprehensive meeting to have a game plan going forward for the faith community in terms of how to deal with this new administration. So first, the Poverty Law Center, and then the ministers. Thanks.
Those are excellent points. And, what I'm seeing in the early days out of the Biden-Harris administration is that they are doing the right things. I think it's incredibly important. You may have seen just yesterday that Secretary of Defense Austin announced that he's going to have a 60-day period to really review the military. And, they've already found that, in 3 key areas, hate speech, in recruiting and promotion, that there's, racism and that they need to take some serious steps. So they've, Southern Poverty Law Center is happy to work with them and provide, resources and our data to help with that. But I think that, you have the first African-American Secretary of Defense, and that's his first action. That's incredibly important. In Congress, there's a new piece of legislation, the Domestic Prevention of Terrorism Act. And that's one that we find important because it's looking to provide more resources at the state and local level to combat white nationalism. So it's really about, working to provide communities the resources they need. And then the Biden administration has also initiated a plan to look about a government-wide look at how to coordinate better, share intelligence, and elevate this issue. So, we're in the early stages, but, at least coming from the administration, there is, sincere effort. But I will note that that doesn't mean the threat is going away or getting better. 74 million people galvanized by Trump's stop the steal rhetoric, inciting them to violence. These people think that Biden is illegitimate. So I expect to see more armed riots, more storming of state capitol buildings. So this is not going away. Biden and Harris have their work cut out for them.
Okay, there was another part to your question, Hemi, or not?
The faith community, I guess the cohesiveness, combined plan. I know I covered Reverend Mills and Lamar a lot with the DC operation, but I don't see the pollination on the national level on what's being done in terms of meetings or.
Yeah, what I was saying to that, Brother Hamil, there are, if you check out Black Church PAC, Political Action Committee, that's an umbrella organization. There are a number of organizations that planned and worked very hard. Let's be very clear. Were it not for the organizing of Black churches on the ground in Georgia, it would not have flipped, and Ossoff and Warnock would not have been elected. Were it not for the pressure that Black churches put on the Black electorate in South Carolina, Biden would not have secured the nomination. So what you see from my contacts and association, there is not one person or 2 people speaking for Black churches, which to me is a healthy thing. It is more diffuse, but there are many people on the front lines doing the organizing. And nationally, the 7 historically Black denominations are in constant contact. I'm in those meetings. We're mobilizing Black Church PAC. And also there is a lot of cross-pollination with Dr. Barber, the Poor People's Campaign Moral Revival, because his 14 policy points that they have rolled out are policy points that the majority of Black denominations support. So there is, I want you all, where you can, to help disabuse the notion that there is not national coordination. There's not like one queen of the Black church, one king of the Black church, but there is much organization and a lot of leverage has happened to bring us to where we are. Now what we are looking for are deliverables.
Brother Lamar, I know, Brother Richard, you would want this. Can we maybe tell us strategically, I know I can get to you, but a lot of us on the line, the Black press, historically, we struggle to get people when a strategic things happen, a bombing or something, we struggle, it's always on the weekend. Who do we call? How do we get that so we can have you all on the point in the paper by the deadline going forward.
I'll tell you this, Brother Mill. You know, whenever something happens, you know, you call me and I call you back.
Right.
So I will always connect you, and then you and I can talk offline. There are some other folks. It just depends on the level of granularity. Sometimes I think it seems like you all want local voices, and then when you want national voices, at least in my little corner of Black church, I can help to connect you.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, we have a lot of people with questions. Let's go to John X. Miller, and then Deborah Berry, and then Marita Cole.
Right, good afternoon. Question is for Reverend Mills and Reverend Lamar about white evangelicals. What do you say to white preachers and congregations about their Christian values and convictions, given what happened and what is happening with MAGA? And what is their response?
Okay, I'm just going to share a little bit about what's happening in the United Methodist Church. African Americans in the U.S., African Americans maybe represent about 6% of the demographic in the United Methodist Church. If we go worldwide, then we have a whole different picture when we talk about our African brothers and sisters. But with the death of George Floyd, the United Methodist Church really stepped up, I would say, more to the plate beyond the usual do a study, have a task force or something like that. And really from all levels of the church, the bishops, from a jurisdictional perspective, and at the annual conference level. I hope I'm not talking language that folks don't understand, but at all levels of the church, dismantling racism came on the agenda as a #1 thing. And so everyone's been challenged and confronted, whether you are liberal or conservative or moderate in the United Methodist Church. The churches have been challenged to take more proactive steps to becoming anti-racist communities. In my annual conference, pastors have been challenged to preach or teach on racism monthly. That's been going on for several months now. And the people as a whole, United Methodists, are being challenged to engage in some of the best resources available to discern and confront their own biases and racism, which includes some of the intercultural assessments and things like that. So we, again, only speaking as a United Methodist and what's going on with us, we are really having more than conversations and being more proactive and having more action occurring. And I've been really at the beginning and inspired by the response of the bishops to start with, and in particular, I would say the Southern bishops to start with, seeing the kind of response as a whole, across race and so forth.
What I would say, Brother Miller, is this, and many Black theologians have said this: the God of the enslaver is not the God of the enslaved.
Come on.
So I need to be very, very clear. When dealing with white evangelicals, I know what they say, but their Christian ethic proves that they can't, this is, for me to engage with a white evangelical, for me, it is an interfaith dialogue because we don't have the same faith. It's an interfaith dialogue. I mean, I love, and I am not a Christian chauvinist. Christians do not own the truth. All right. So I love talking to everybody of all faiths, no faiths. One of my dear friends is over the Black non-believers, right? So I'm cool with everyone. But white evangelicals, that is an enslaver's religion. That is the religion of Strom Thurmond and Lester Maddox. That is the religion that is fundamentally, we do not worship the same God. And I am unwilling to pretend that the God of Billy Graham and Jerry Falwell is the God of Jeremiah Wright.
Come on.
Their faith, and this is something else that we have to be clear about. Every human dance with rhetoric is political. You're journalists. You are political. There's a politics. You have in mind a world when you write. I am political in my preaching and thinking, but so are they. This is another thing that burns me up because it is where journalism, and I'm not get away with, but it assumes the universality of whiteness. Universality of whiteness, or what Toni Morrison would call that gaze, that normative white gaze. I will be interviewed by someone that'll ask me about the Black church being political, but they would not ask Robert Jeffress the same thing. Robert Jeffress and Jerry Falwell's son and Franklin Graham are as political as I am, but no one asks them about their politics because they are shielded by the normative gaze of whiteness and the assumption of white universality. Theirs are the politics of the status quo, and they will support the status quo with violence, as did their fathers and their mothers before them. Ours are the politics of liberation. Ours are the politics that every human being should have what is necessary for flourishing. So what I say to white evangelicals is, I am clear that your God is not my God, and I am clear that you have no investment in my humanity or my flourishing. I have an investment in your humanity and your flourishing, but I also ain't gonna go to sleep with my eyes closed with you in the room.
Okay, Deborah Berry.
Well, that kind of goes into what I was going to ask. Pastor Zion, thank you for joining this call. I'm a reporter, national reporter with USA Today. And I was going to ask Pastor Lamar, particularly since you brought up the importance of and the power of words, and to ask you, what is it that journalists are doing right and or wrong as it relates to telling the stories of the attacks on Black churches and the impact? And what are the stories that we're missing that you think we should be about telling?
Well, for me, you know what, let me give it to you very easily. There is a podcast that I enjoy called Throughline, produced by NPR. Throughline's raison d'etre is to give context for the stories that we see. What we see today, as some poets have said, history may not repeat itself, but it does have patterns. And so what I'm looking for is, when you write about a church burning, how can you tie that into what happened at Wilmington, what happened in Tulsa, and the work that Dr. Malveaux has done around economic? This stuff is based on economics. This stuff is about, you criticize me for not achieving, and when I achieve, you kill me. You burn my stuff down. You destroy my community. So what I'm looking for is context. When we talk about the filibuster, like people talk, but we got to understand, it's starting with John C. Calhoun and in races who is roasting in hell right now. There is such a physical place, I'm not so sure, but he used a talking filibuster beginning in the 1850s when he saw that it looked like slavery was losing its political protection. And then his political progeny, Strom Thurmond, used the same filibuster. It was used time and time again to short white supremacy and to stop anything that looks like democracy. That is a story that has to be told. Don't just talk about the filibuster out of the damn blues, out of the blue, as if it has no historical analog, and as if it is the same thing. They will use it today to block COVID relief. But that is akin if they could, that is akin to shoring up enslavement and keeping Jim Crow strong. It is keeping the resources of the government from the most vulnerable. It is keeping the status quo in place. So what I am looking for from journalists, and I know it's difficult because you don't have a lot of words, and the American public has been, I mean, I hate to say this, but so dumbed down by the information that we consume. But I know you all are smart enough to figure out this is not a new thing, and the way that Mitch McConnell is using it today is the way that John Calhoun used it, for the similar purpose of keeping anything that looks like democracy from flourishing. Those are the kinds of stories. So then maybe it might serve to wake us up. Does that help?
Yes.
I heard that. All right, Maureen Coley.
Hi, thank you, pastors. This had a little bit to do with the actual targeting of the churches, which are not really that close together. I wondered if there is any evidence that you're aware of that there was, that the churches were, that this whole effort with those 2 Black churches downtown was coordinated and premeditated. It seems kind of weird that it was just part of the procession, and then they got one Black church on 16th and one Black church on 11th and K. So do you have any knowledge of that?
I don't have, Sister Marita, good to see you. I don't have any information that it was coordinated. Now, we've got multiple law enforcement and other types of investigative bodies are looking for that, but as of yet, I mean, it would not surprise me, but as of yet, I've not received any hard evidence. Dr. Mills, have you?
No hard evidence, but certainly the fact that the 2 churches are historic and I mean, very historic and known, and that sort of thing would suggest that they did some scoping out to figure out which churches they would attack.
Okay, Hazel Edney, and then A. Peter Bailey. Hazel? Okay, Peter. Oh no, okay, you're there, Hazel. All right.
Yes. Thanks, Richard. I really have a question I wanted to ask the first 2 speakers, John and Valerie. Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I wanted to find out if they had ever heard of an organization when I was living in New York. I was with Ebony Magazine in New York. And in 1971, I became aware of an organization called the Japanese African American Society.
Mm.
And Mary Koshiyama introduced me to this organization. Mary Koshiyama was a Japanese American who family had been in concentration camps during World War II. And she was kind of like the only kind of like honorary member of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. In fact, you see her holding Brother Malcolm in her arms. There's a famous photograph of her. But I would like to ask him, does the Japanese African American Society still exist? The last correspondence I had from them, they were founded in 1971. The last correspondence I had came from them in 1985, and they were based in Atlanta, Georgia. And they sent me a list of what they were planning on doing, and a list of all of the presidents and the advisors to the president. But it was called the Japanese African American Society. And I was just wondering if that organization still exists in any kind of way.
You know, well, first, Yuri Kochiyama is quite a hero in both the not in the Japanese American and in the African American communities and the whole civil rights history. I am not aware if that organization still exists, and you have really piqued my curiosity. I'm going to find out.
Okay, well, you can contact me about it if you want to. I have some information.
Wow, that's great. Yeah.
Put your contact information in the chat if you would, Peter.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Hazel.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that, Richard. I would like to ask a question to Ms. Cork, if she is still on. I see her picture there. Is she still there?
Susan, are you still there?
Yes, hello. I would like to ask about how you all on an ongoing basis at the Southern Poverty Law Center, because I use you a lot and document a lot, write stories on a lot of what is in your hate map and your intelligence group. I'm Hazel Trice-Edney, editor-in-chief of the Trice-Edney Newswire. And, but I'd like to know how you keep up with who is currently documented in your hate map. Use as an example the Nation of Islam, Minister Louis Farrakhan. I see that you have quotes by him from 1993, 91, 84, and he is still documented as a hate group, the Nation of Islam. Do you all go back and revisit some things that he may have done lately? Somebody mentioned the Million Man March, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to revisit whether or not you still consider the Nation of Islam as a hate group? And then I have a second question for the pastors, Richard.
Sure, thanks. A good question, Hazel. So on my team in the intelligence department, we have called desks organized by ideology. Sorry, my daughter's making noise in the background. So we have desks organized by ideology.
Irresistible.
I'm sorry.
And
it's okay.
Yes, it is. It's okay.
So we call it activation. So we monitor every year, and it's a report annually. So each analyst on my team is monitoring a certain ideology. And we look to see if groups are active in a particular year. So I think you're talking about different, the individuals are not, it's not necessarily updated because we've been doing this tracking for 30 years, but to be listed in the annual year in hate report and be listed as one of the groups means that there has been actions taken on behalf of hateful beliefs in the past calendar year. If that makes sense. So we actually get questions, from charities and others that, we'll see groups that had, been there on the past, but if they have not taken action in the past year. So actually the number of hate groups went down this past year, but as we all know, the level of hate has not decreased, but that is more a function of, some groups went inactive. The Klan is viewed as toxic. A lot of white supremacists and racists, they're not card-carrying members of particular groups. So I also want to stress that it's less about groups now necessarily than, lone wolves or people on the internet can draw inspiration from a number of groups, but the actual count of that group means that they've been active in the past year. In
the past year, okay.
Okay. Kenny Burns, I see your hand
I
up.
had a follow-up, Richard. I'm sorry, I had a question for the pastors really quickly, for Pastors Lamar and Pastor Mills. I would like to ask you, I am also, in addition to being a journalist, I'm an ordained minister. Dr. Reynolds and I belong to the same church, Greater Mount Calvary. And I would like to ask you, what you think about the so-called Christian prophets. It's a difference talking about just the evangelical pastors, but they are actually listening to Christian prophets who said that Trump was supposed to win and who now say that Trump is still their president. Can you, I don't know, either theologically or anything, or how can that be dealt with? Specifically for those prophets who are backing the pastors with the lies.
Dr. Mills?
Dr. Mills or
to you.
Or you.
Okay.
All right, well, what I would say is those are prophets who's in this prophet. And, and I'm not given to alliteration or rhyming. I'm not that kind of
preach.
But what I would say to you, Sister Hazel, is this: those prophets, their theology and their imaginary biblically are rooted in white evangelicalism. Let me give you, it is, and again, some of the best white evangelicals are Black people. There are loads of white evangelicals in blackface. Let's be very clear about that. And let me also say this. So if you pay attention to this, this is where you see that the theology of Jesus Christ cannot pierce white supremacist, white evangelical churches. They will not allow that to pierce it. So if you pay attention to the Revelation prophecy movement, the late great Planet Earth, all those kinds of people, the way they prophesied, if you go back and look, even what was the book, the Left Behind series, all of that is a part of a Darbyist, and you can look up Darby, D-A-R-B-Y, a Darbyist reading of the text and of Revelation. But the way that they read it, it was always pro-American empire. So they would read Russia in the text as the great dragon or beast, but they are always reading from the perspective of the US empire being chosen of God, and at the consummation of history, God will defend, protect the United States of America and the American empire and destroy other nations. That has nothing to do with God. What that has to do with is claiming for your own imperial ends a theological justification. And let's be clear, the Third Reich, everybody has a religion. Every empire must clothe itself theologically. And those prophets are wearing the garments of the empire. Clearly, that's it. End of story.
Richard, can I ask a question? Of the
Briefly,
churches?
please.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Very quick. I won't just ask one quick question.
Yes.
I would like to ask Reverend Lamar, has the Black churches ever considered teaching Black history a part of their agenda? I'm one of those people who believe that no matter how, that Black public schools will never teach our history, never. And we waste our time trying to get them to do so. I think one of the major sources for teaching Black history can be Black churches. Has your church or any group of Black churches ever considered teaching Black history as a part of their agenda?
Brother Peter, that's what we do. And Dr. Malvo is on. I do it every time I open my mouth. That is who we are. If you visit Carter G. Woodson's house here, where Asala was founded, he was a member of the Shiloh Baptist Church. You cannot separate the work, our archival work around our history, not only here, because as the great Asa Hilliard said, our story does not begin here, right? But we have always done that. Most of I am a product of Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, of an HBCU. Most of our traditions come out of church basements, church schools. I think what we have to do is go back and reclaim that. I think the for us is we think that we have achieved something when we can. When I eulogized Gwen Ifill, one of your colleagues as a journalist, I said the thing that I admire most about Gwen is that she never aspired to matriculate through the University of Blackness. She decided to stay Black all of her life. Most of us want to graduate when we get a certain kind of education, a certain kind of exposure, a certain kind of economic reality, and that's problematic. So who we are at core, we always value our stories and tell them and try to shape our. Now, we're not doing a sufficient job of it, Brother Peter. We need to do better, but we are doing it.
Okay.
Richard, by the way, yes. Richard, I live in a building, a seniors building that is owned by Asbury United Methodist Church.
Is that right?
Yes.
About the small world, as they say. All right, Katie Burns. Katie Burns, and then Ron Taylor, and then we have to move on.
Greetings from New Jersey. And sorry I'm late today. I had to anchor this morning and there's a few inches of snow falling outside. So I was a little held up in traffic coming back. My question is for Pastor Lamar. I heard you say that Black people or Black Christians, and correct me if I'm wrong, Black Christians don't and white Christians don't worship the same God. And I preface this by
let me.
Yeah, please help me out.
Yeah, no, white evangelicals.
Okay.
Yeah,
white
not all,
evangelicals and
not all,
There's a
not all,
difference.
not all white Christians, white evangelicals. And yeah, so if the God of the enslaver is not the God of the enslaved, and I will draw a straight line from the God of enslavers to the God of Lindsey Graham, to the God of Mitch McConnell. All of these are good Christian churchgoers, but they have not broken with the theological and ethical impulses of the theology of the enslavers. And as Howard Thurman, Gaylord Wilmore, and so many others have said, their God is not our God. And I'm just very clear, like if you sit me on the stage with them, and I've been on stage with them before, I am not pulling out a violin, I'm not singing Kumbaya. No longer will I offer cover for your religion of death and violence. I will not.
Well, to be fair, they're not going to sing Kumbaya either, but
no. Oh no, they will. They will. Now they like a nice photograph with a Negro like me. They like that.
The last photo I saw, they weren't. But here's my question, and I preface this by saying I'm a Christian, even though I've been practicing heathenism for the last 3 years, working on Sunday morning. But here's the question. How is that theologically possible? Because here's what I see as a Christian, and it irks my last nerve. I don't see any difference between white evangelicals perverting the gospel for their own selfish and political purposes than some Black people like Creflo Dollar and some of the more famous ones who are using the gospel to benefit their pocket. I mean, what's the difference? One's benefiting, the Black one's benefiting their pocket, the other one's benefiting their supremacy. But last I checked, it's still the same Bible.
What I would say, brother, is there ain't no difference.
There you go.
Thank you.
They're
but
in the
how can
same
you
boat.
say that they don't worship the same God when they're sinning? I mean, it's still all sin.
Notice what I said, that there are white evangelicals in blackface. My formulation is shorthand for saying that I am a part of the Black prophetic tradition. And our tradition is for the liberation of all human beings. What I am saying is, I am not going to pretend that because you have a cross and a Bible that you are a Christian. I go back.
Nor should you.
Right. Like the same, I'll go back to Brother Malcolm. If a cat has kittens in an oven, they ain't called biscuits, right? So you can have a Bible and a cross and a seminary degree and a collar turned around backwards. I am a Matthew 25 kind of Christian, where Jesus said, did you clothe me? Did you feed me? Did you visit me? What they have done is spiritualize the gospel with a piss poor reading of Paul that says that some personal pietistic impulse to say, I love Jesus, saves you and sends you to heaven. That is not Christianity. That is an escapist Docetism.
What reading of Paul, though?
Jesus never asked anybody if they died, but if your church asked people, if you die tonight, where are you going? That's not gospel.
Right.
Jesus never asked anybody that. And so what I am saying is, and I hear what you're saying. I want to be clear because racialized language is problematic, but we're kind of damned to use it. I'm just very clear that white evangelicals, and again, those are not just white people. I probably was a recovering white evangelical until about 20 years ago, because if you grow up in the Southeastern United States, everybody's a white evangelical. They just don't know it. Even the Catholics are white evangelical. Even the people, even the atheists are white evangelical. Everybody. It is hegemonic in its reach. And so you have to unlearn and relearn. So I need to be more specific with my language, but look, Creflo Dollar is in the same boat.
Yeah, it's a culture down there, and it's amazing. I mean, it's a different conversation. I'll cut it short, but
we had two more questions, and then we got to move on to the next segment. All right, Betty Ann Williams and Jeanette Pinkney.
My hand was up by mistake. I don't have a question, Pete.
Good. All right, Betty Ann.
Okay, pastors, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Please talk about your impressions of the FBI and other law enforcement entities you've dealt with, and whether the reports of infiltration by white supremacists have some basis as far as you've been able to ascertain.
Dr. Mills, would you care? And I'll jump in.
Well, I assume you're talking about the story about the Proud Boy having been a informant or something to that effect. That's what you're referring to?
Or even are the agents who are doing the investigations of the incidents related to your churches being as aggressive as you would expect, as intense as you would expect? What's your impression of law enforcement and whether they're doing what they ought to in this situation?
Well, I'll give my very first impression when the incident occurred at our church, and having law enforcement come and interview us to get, information about the incident. I was a bit taken aback that the question that was asked of me was, do I consider this a hate crime? And it was asked in such a way that I guess I felt like he wanted to hear no. And so that surprised me. And that to report something that's clearly a hate crime, to get some dampening of that, or to have to defend that something that you think something is that you're the victim of it, and you have to kind of push and defend that we believe this is a hate crime and we want it to be investigated beyond the local police.
Okay, Ron Taylor.
My answer to that, Sister Betty, is that for me, and again, I suffer, most men have profound naivete. I think that the sisters would agree with that. So I may be naive, but the discourse that I have had with law enforcement, the FBI persons, they were very professional, very interested in hearing our story. They followed up in a way that has been commendable, and the Metropolitan Police Department as well. Now, I'm under no illusions about the history of policing and the challenges, but attending to us and to our leadership in moving this forward, our experience, quite frankly, has been professional and good.
Good.
All right. Ron Taylor, last question for the segment.
They may appear to be small potatoes, but what are we to make of the people of color who seem to be intimately involved with the Proud Boys and others? I saw them at the vanguard of the insurrection. They were victims of a stabbing on New York Avenue when Proud Boys were attacked. Saw that the rally that triggered the insurrection included a Black organizer. Throughout Trump's campaign rallies, Black people were always on the stage behind Trump. Who are these Black people? And do I just dismiss them as people who are crazy? Or is there something more to be said about them?
If I could answer about that, just because I've been looking at the data, it was about 8% of Black women, about 16% of Black men who went for Trump. Now, the women, I don't know what they did to them. Many of the men identify with his machismo. They identify with his bluster. Given the social hierarchy of Black folk in our nation, there are many Black men who feel that they've just been stepped over. It was not the majority of Black men by any stretch of the imagination. It was maybe 1 in 6. For Black women, it was probably about 1 in 9 or 10. So there was no overwhelming support for Black people for Trump. But here's the one thing that some of my research has evolved around in the past 15 or 20 years. Black men like business leaders. Black men who are entrepreneurial like business leaders. They want to deal with someone who's going to reduce their taxes, make it easier for them to do business, and they perceive Democrats as people who are creating barriers. And so if you look at, I forgot the year when Michael Steele ran for lieutenant governor in Maryland, he had overwhelming support of Black, not overwhelming, but it's over a third, which is very unusual in Maryland for Democrats. But it was about, he was pro-business, he was not ideological, he's pro-business, let me help Black business. So I would just say that we have to look at the roots of where folks are coming from to understand that as repugnant as 45 was, many people thought there was still some ROI to him. And forgive me, Richard, if I jumped in.
That's fine. That's what I'm glad you spoke up. Now, Reverend Lamar particularly was talking about context, the need for context, and that has been one of the well, demands, I guess, of the Black and Latino people in newsrooms during this racial reckoning. And one of those newspapers is the Kansas City Star, and we have Toriano Porter, who works on the editorial page there and led an online community meeting last week about the Star. So I'll throw this question to Toriano. Will we see that kind of change at the Kansas City Star?
Good afternoon, and thank you, guys. This has been a powerful, powerful last 2 hours for me. You guys have to understand something here in Kansas City, Missouri. I work in a predominantly white space, so to look on this Zoom and to see, you know, majority of my people here, man, this is powerful.
All right.
I just admire you guys and the work you're doing in the community. But the work starts now for us. Where reconciliation comes actions. We've admitted to our past coverage of the Black community and how it hurt us, the Black community, how it's played in the stereotypes. Now, what's the course of action? I've challenged my manager editor and my president to make tangible action. So I'm hoping to see more diversity in the reporting ranks, more diversity in the recruiting ranks when it comes to interns, and definitely more minority voices and diverse voices when it comes to managerial and editing positions. Like, we lack that there. So we're on the clock.
All right. Okay. All right. We moved the introductions to the end of the session instead of the beginning, so we try to get more in. So now is the time for folks to introduce themselves as briefly as possible, so that we can further our networking, and people who have questions can contact the folks later on or in the chat. So let's start with Dr. Malveaux, who's first on my screen.
Hi, I'm Julianne Malveaux, economist, author, president emerita of Bennett College for Women. I do a Monday morning show at WPFW 9 to 10 a.m. and have a kind of up and down TV show at UDC TV.
All right, Barbara Reynolds. Oh yeah, unmute yourself. Still on mute.
There, I'm Barbara Reynolds, formerly USA Today, editorial board member, Chicago Tribune. I've had 3 chairs in journalism, but 8 books. My latest book, of course, is The Memoirs of Coretta Scott King. I have a new project deals with a Black robot that I'm really excited about, hoping to release very shortly. I write for the Trice-Edney News Service.
Okay, Betty Ann Williams. Betty Ann. Okay, we're gonna move to Kenny Burns.
Hello, Kenneth Burns, South Jersey reporter for WHYY-FM in Philadelphia, also a Sunday morning anchor for the moment, and longtime DMV Baltimore resident.
Okay,
Now,
Jeanette Pinckney. Oh, sorry, Jeanette. Unmute. Unmute, please. Jeanette. Okay. Are you on yet? Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. DC native, former broadcast and print journalist in DC, Minnesota, New York, and Johannesburg.
All right. John X. Miller.
Good afternoon. I'm John X. Miller, senior editor at The Undefeated, longtime newspaper editor for Gannett, McClatchy, and everybody else, and board chair of the Maynard Institute.
Okay. Maurita Coley. Maurita.
Hello, I'm multitasking. Hi, everyone. What was the question?
Introduce yourself, please.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Marita Coley, President and CEO of Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council. Very happy to be here and happy to have the pastors today, one of which is my pastor, Reverend Lamar, who is incredible, who is a liberation theologist in the First Order. And I'm learning so much that I wish I had known about 40 years ago.
All right. Kenneth Walker.
Yes, I'm former journalist with the Washington Star, ABC News, National Public Radio. Basically retired now, but I am writing my memoir.
All right. Peggy Lewis.
Former broadcast journalist, WPLG in Miami, WTOP, WCBS, former broadcast journalist, professor at Howard, and former dean at Trinity Washington University, and just retired in December.
I didn't know that. Congratulations. And don't forget the Clintons.
Worked with Alexis Herman at Labor and was in director of specialty media for the Clinton administration.
Okay, Peter Bailey.
Yes, my name is A. Peter Bailey. I'm a former associate editor of Ebony Magazine, founding member of the Organization of Afro-American Community, founded by Brother Malcolm, editor of this newsletter.
Well, hello.
And currently writing a book called Brother Malcolm X's Strategic Visionary Pan-Africanism, Why It Alarmed and Angered the FBI and the CIA.
Okay, Ron Taylor.
I'm a former journalist with the Washington Post. I'm now copy editor at the Washington Informer, and I've been around newspapers for about 30 or 40 years.
All right, Emil Harris.
Emil Harris, I'm like Ron, I'm former Washington Post reporter, work at the Washington Informer, and I teach at the University of Maryland, Philip Merrill School of Journalism, and I freelance for wonderful people like USA Today sometimes, and everybody else I can find. So it's just wonderful to see all of us here together like this. I really enjoy it myself.
Oh, well, all right. You have to come back next time. Melanie Eversley.
Hi, everyone. I'm an independent journalist based in New York City with bylines in The Undefeated, Fortune, BET.com, and more. I'm also a former Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and the Detroit Free Press, former USA Today reporter. Right now, I'm guest editor of a digital magazine focused on Black artisans.
Okay, Benita Bing.
Sorry about that. Hello, I'm Benita Bing. I am a president of the Exposure Group, African American Photographers Association. I'm also the producer of the Zoomcast, and I also own the Talbert and Bing studios over in Brooklyn in the northeast section of DC.
Okay, Hazel Edney.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hazel Trice Edney, editor-in-chief of the Trice Edney Newswire, president and CEO of Trice Edney Communications. I also teach multicultural media history at the Howard University Kathy Hughes School of Communications.
Okay, is that Gloria with the iPhone? Gloria Minot. Okay, we'll have to
There you
get
go.
that.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
Gloria Minot, formerly of WPFW and WHUR Radio.
Okay, Robin Washington.
Hey there. Oh, y'all know me. Great to be with everybody here. I'm Robin Washington. I'm in Duluth, Minnesota, 16 below zero today. I'm the former editor of the Duluth News Tribune, Boston Globe, Boston Herald, WGBH, and I have a show on with those are in the past, kind of present, and I have a show on Wisconsin Public Radio.
Okay, Toriano, you've introduced yourself, and Nichelle Smith.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nichelle Smith. I'm the enterprise editor for Racism and History at USA Today. I'm looking at the roots of all the systems that still keep us in bondage, as I call it. Formerly, long time ago, I was with BET and the Smithsonian, but I've been at USA Today about 18 years or so, and just wanted to let you all know that our annual Black History Month publication is on newsstands, and if you can't find it there, I put down the link to the e-edition in the chat, as well as a means of buying the physical copy. I'm delighted to see everybody here today. It was a great conversation.
Great. Karen Dunlap.
Karen Brown Dunlap, coming to you from Tampa, where the sun has come out and a few people are getting ready for a football game downtown. Most of my life was at the Poynter Institute, where I was dean and then president until I retired. I'm in Tampa now, but my life is split between Tampa and Nashville, where I'm working on real estate and trying to build without gentrifying. It's good to see you, Richard, John Fulbeek, and so many others.
All right, Fred Sweets.
Go Bucks.
My name is Fred Sweets. I started life at the St. Louis American newspaper, a great Black weekly. I worked at some small dailies, the Washington Post and the LA Times, ran the AP office in Washington for photos, and now I find myself back at the St. Louis American newspaper.
Okay, thank you. Fergus Shield.
Hi, and thanks to all today's speakers. It was really fascinating listening to your stories. I'm the managing editor of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we spend much of our times looking at illicit money flows around the world and how they underpin inequity and criminality.
All right. Kelvin Childs.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kelvin Childs. I am can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Yeah, I'm Kelvin Childs. I'm currently a freelance writer writing about entertainment material for CBR. I am a Baltimore native, longtime member of Asbury United Methodist Church, and very happy that my pastor, Reverend Dr. Lanther Mills, joined us today. I have worked in print media for a long time, one time for editor and publisher for Gannett News Service, for Newhouse News Service, and got my start as an intern at the Baltimore News American.
All right, very good. Pearl Stewart. Unmute. Unmute.
There I am. Okay. Pearl Stewart, well, longtime journalist, currently retired freelancing, formerly with the Oakland Tribune, editor and reporter, and with the San Francisco Chronicle, and also taught at Florida A&M for 5 years.
All right, Roger Witherspoon. Unmute, please.
Hi, everybody. I've been in journalism for about 60 years and worked in all forms of the media, print, magazines. I was a producer at CNN. I was a news writer at NBC.
We can't hear him.
Oh.
Well, he's very fuzzy. You're very fuzzy.
It's,
Yeah, you are fuzzy.
It's cracking up.
Oh. I don't know what to do about that.
Okay, well we'll just move on to the next one, but we know who you are now. Lynn Adrian. Lynn.
Yeah. I'm Lynn Adrian. I'm the director of the DC graduate program in broadcast and digital journalism for the Newhouse School of Syracuse University. I'm also a longtime broadcast journalist with the networks and also local television stations in Washington. I'm on the board for Journal-isms for the Roundtable, and we knocked it out of the park today. That's all I'm saying.
Excellent. All right, Sharon Farmer, our photographer.
Southeast DC,
Yes.
former director of photography at the White House, and where I learned all the secrets I wish I could tell y'all, but never stop fighting for Blackness, because there are people who continue to undermine all of us.
Yeah. I wonder if I don't know if Derek is still here, but if he has some Southeast representation in his Black Power sites in DC, but we'll find that out. Jane Siegel.
I'm Jean Siegel, and thank you so much, Richard, for the invitation. I'm head of PR for McClatchy, based in DC.
Okay, very good. All right. Winston Favor.
Hello, everyone. I'm surprised I get to introduce myself. How you doing? My name is Winston Favor. I attended Metropolitan when I lived in DC for a little while, and I don't know if I was in front or behind Mr. Prince, but either way, he and I connected, and I'm very thankful that we did because I enjoy his journalism's emails, and also I really enjoyed this roundtable. So I appreciate the invitation. Thanks for letting me introduce myself. I'm sure I've probably read all of your works over the years, so thank you for your writing, and I did enjoy it and read it. Thank you.
All right, here. Joe Davidson.
Joe Davidson. I'm a columnist with the Washington Post. For many years, I was with the Wall Street Journal, including coverage of apartheid and days of Nelson Mandela's release and after. And I am a founder of NABJ.
Okay. And speaking of NABJ founders, Paul Delaney.
Richard, Paul Delaney, and please stop me when I give this rundown of my career. Graduate of Ohio State J School, worked for the Atlanta Daily World, the Dayton Daily News, the Washington Evening Star, the New York Times, the Baltimore Afro-American, and a few others. I'll stop
Okay.
there.
And of course, there's on our roundtable committee. He's one of the organizers of this event. Gene Meyer. Unmute, please. Gene, unmute.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm Gene Meyer. I'm a former Washington Post reporter and editor. I'm the author of Fight for Freedom, the African-American Soldiers in John Brown's Army. I'll be giving a Zoom talk on February 16th. I'll put a link in the chat room on the subject. I'll have a few additional things to say about insurrection, insurrectionists, and how different insurrectionists are treated in our history. I'm hoping that we can put together a young adult edition of Fight for Freedom. And I'm also working on a memoir, and it's so good to see so many friends, old and new. Hey, Emil, how you doing?
All right, Mary Curtis.
Hi, everyone. So good to see so many other Baltimore natives on the call. Formerly of many places, now a columnist at CQ Roll Call, Politics, Culture, and Race, host of its Equal Time with Mary C. Curtis podcast, senior leader of the Op-Ed Project, and contributor to Now What? The Voters Have Spoken, essays on life after Trump with folks like Anthony Scaramucci, with whom I did a book event recently, and it was kind of crazy.
Brenda Seiler.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here. I'm Brenda Seiler, currently a contributing writer to the Washington Informer. My journalism career started out in Atlanta in broadcast media, where I was covering Maynard Jackson's weekly press conferences. It was a thrill. I'm so happy to be on this call with Roger Witherspoon, who mentored me, whether he realized he was mentoring me, but he mentored me when we were in Atlanta at the same time. And I have used his lessons throughout my career as I went into public relations and corporate communications. I put in the chat box the link to my preview of The Black Church, the PBS documentary from Skip Gates that starts on February the 16th. A lot of what we talked about today is the foundations are shown in that documentary. So I hope that you'll give it a watch. It's very good.
Very good.
Happy to be here.
Yes, happy you're here. Brad Bennett asked, when can we see the tape of the recording of this? Very, very soon. That will be, I'll distribute to everybody who's here, the link. And also the chat room chatter will be distributed as well. Jason Michelow Johnson.
Hey, Jason Michelow Johnson here, author of Soul Sanctuary, Images of the African American Worship Experience, with the foreword by Gordon Parks. I like to think of it as one of the preeminent books on the Black church worship experience. I'm currently teaching African Americans in the media at Savannah State University. And the presentation that George had earlier when he talked about the tribute to Kwame Ture, I have an exclusive photo of all the SNCC chairmen together at that event.
Wow.
I actually set it up because one of the participants was leaving the stage and had left the stage, and I went and brought him back. H. Rap Brown. So if anybody's doing any historical things on SNCC or the chairman or the Black church, I probably have more images than most people alive over the last 50 years.
All right, okay. John Yearwood.
Hi, Richard. Always good to be on for this call. I'm an editor at Politico, former board member of NABJ, and currently on several boards. But this morning, Richard, I'm celebrating the release of Mahmoud Hussein, the Al Jazeera journalist, who was held for 4 years without being charged in Egypt. And NABJ, the International Press Institute, and many other organizations worked really hard over the last 4 years to get him released. So that is some good news this morning.
It is good news. It is good news. Juliet Beverly.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all again. I'm the content manager for brainfacts.org, published by the Society for Neuroscience.
Okay. Shirley Carswell.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shirley Carswell. I'm the executive director of the Dow Jones News Fund, which provides training, internships, and scholarships for students who aspire to be journalists, and also for high school. We fund high school workshops. I'm formerly of the Washington Post. I was deputy managing editor there. Also taught at Howard University for the last 7 years.
You see the t-shirt, the
sweatshirt. You know.
Okay, Bobby Bowman.
Hi, I'm Bobby Bowman. I am a happily retired journalist and even happier graduate student in history at George Mason University. It's so nice to see so many friends, especially Karen Dunlap. Karen, it is just wonderful to see you after all this time. Take care, everybody.
All right, thanks, Bobby. David Honig.
Hello, Richard. Thank you for pulling together this wonderful gathering. I'm the President Emeritus of the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council. I live in Florida, where I'm Chief Counsel for the NAACP, focusing mostly on voter rights and voter protection. And I'm on Journal-isms Board.
Yes, you are.
It's a privilege.
Okay, Ricardo Hazel. Ricardo, first timer.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say that it's been great sitting here and talking to all you real OGs and learning and being the dumbest one in the room for I feel like the first time in a long time, and I really appreciate it. Currently, I work as the editor at large for the Shadow League, covering social commentary and social issues as they relate to sports. I started out at the editor and publisher company in 1997 as a research intern. My clips have appeared in Black Enterprise, The Root, the Philadelphia Sun, and myriads of other locations, just trying to grow and learn as a journalist. And I believe that part of the craft is also realizing that I'm an activist without even having to say it. And I appreciate the insight from all you wonderful people. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks for being here. All right, Michael Hill.
Hi there, Richard. Thank you for a great program. I'm Michael Hill. I'm retired TV editor with the Washington Post.
Okay, Brad Bennett.
Hi again, everyone.
Yeah.
Brad Bennett, interim editorial director at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Susan, we talked to Michelle Duster.
I'm here. So I am an author, a speaker. I'm a professor at Columbia College Chicago, public historian. I've written or contributed to over a dozen books. I've written articles for Time Magazine, Essence, Huffington Post, Teen Vogue, several others, including, I'm going to put in the chat, an article that I wrote for CNN.com about the insurrectionist. And I have to give myself a plug. I've just finished this book. Was just released less than 2 weeks ago on January 26th about my great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, called Ida B. the Queen, The Extraordinary Life and Legacy of Ida B. Wells. So thank you. This is my first time participating, and I'm really enjoying this.
Excellent. Okay. Wanda Lloyd.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Wanda Lloyd, retired Gannett editor, executive editor of the Montgomery Advertiser, and had 2 books out last year in 2020, and about to start teaching a course, a short course at Georgia Southern University in newsroom leadership.
Very good. Okay.
And a member of the journalism board.
Yay. Annette Halston.
Hi, how are you? I'm a Newark, New Jersey native working with Todd Burrows on the PR for the 50th anniversary of the Black Political Convention. I wrote a book on Harriet Tubman, which came out in 2017 called Harriet Tubman for Beginners. I have an essay in the book Impact: Personal Portraits of Activism, which was edited by Michelle Duster, who just spoke. Currently working with Larry Ham on his autobiography.
Who's Larry Ham now?
Larry Ham is the chair of the People's Organization for Progress, a local grassroots organization. It's been around for almost 40 years in the city of Newark. And that's where I am.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Did I miss anybody? Okay, we got everybody. That's good. All right. Final thoughts, anyone, before we wrap this up? No. That's great. All right, so everybody said what they had to say, which is wonderful.
Actually, Richard, I might say something.
Okay.
I just want to thank you. This has really been, this is my first time participating. You've given me emails from time to time and whatever. But I felt really compelled to do this. I think that all of us just need to give ourselves a high five or a shout out, but you more than anyone really have the sense of community. And at this point in time, that's what we need more than anything else. I mean, you have basically incited a community, and may we all work in your spirit.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Yay!
And thanks for, thanks for finally.
I want to say something.
Here.
Okay.
You know what?
Richard
And I think
Prince,
about Dr.
Saints or
Malveaux,
Chiefs?
and I think about Hazel, Edney, these sisters, and all, and Leon. I'm seeing Fred. We are a family. And how many times, Richard, you would tell me in the post newsroom, somebody passed away. You need to know this, Emil. You need to know. And I'm glad to be here. And I love everybody. I know we love each other. Thank God for our journalist sisters and business leaders that support the African American press, like Hazel, who's one of my main bosses. And I thank God for all of us. But I pray that we can be vigilant with this administration and get to the bottom of a lot of things. There's a lot of news out there. So I'm glad we had this today.
Excellent.
Can I say something, Richard?
Yes, Pearl.
I've been on a lot of these, and I gotta say, you did it this time. You really did it. This one is really excellent, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
Thank you. I think the credit goes to our guests and to all of you. So that's great then.
Yeah, but mainly to you, Richard.
Absolutely. You organized it. You put together.
Exactly.
You put in it.
Okay.
Knowing what a big sports fan you are, Richard. We need
What's
to know
that?
whether it's Chiefs or Bucks today.
I'm not.
Lord.
He doesn't care.
I'm neutral on that one. I'm neutral. Okay, is that it for everybody then?
I just want to say thank you, Richard.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank
you. Yes, may God bless you and keep you, my brother.
Yes.
Piece of the Bucks. I want Tom Brady to lose.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm from the state of Florida.
Mahomes.
Amen to that.
That's all I have to say. I ain't gonna say another word.
I knew I'd introduce controversy, so there it is.
I'm from the state of Florida. You can't.
Hey, Richard, do you have a tease for next month?
No, we're working on that. And we always welcome suggestions. So if you have suggestions to
I want to say that we should put our money where our mouth is to support journalism. So I'm going to send you a good check in the mail next week.
Oh, well, all right. I hope everybody heard that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey,
And thanks, a
Jason.
special thanks to,
Jason, what does that mean? Jason, what does that mean, a good check?
It's money, Benita. Money.
Just sign it.
thank you, everybody. And a special thanks to all of our speakers. I hope they're all still here. I
Hey,
can't see
Eugene
everybody.
Meyer. Eugene.
I'm going to the grocery
and-
store during the Super Bowl.
What's that? Oh, I
I'm
missed
going to the grocery store during
it.
the Super Bowl.
I'm going up to my office to listen to me some jazz during the Super Bowl.
No one will be there.
That's true.
Good.
Get shop during the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Well,
All right.
when you go to the store,
bring
some snacks for everybody.
Right.
Right.
And thanks
Have a
also
ball.
for
Thank
those who
y'all.
are on
Bye-bye.
Facebook Live.
Bye-bye, everybody.
We didn't get a chance to say too much to them, but thanks for tuning in. And we'll see some of you next month. So enjoy the Super Bowl and whatever else you're doing. And thanks again.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.